Okay guys, it's time for another first power up. This time what we have is a 1940 ZENITH model 11S474. This model, as I said, was made in 1940. It's an 11 tube radio. That's what the 11S stands for. And 474, the 4 stands for 1940. And this is pretty standard ZENITH fare. It has an I tube. You can see right there it has the 6U5 I tube. Now I haven't got that installed on the radio yet because I have to rebuild the socket. You always have to replace that 1 megohm resistor that's inside that socket. So, but the radio will power up fine without it. And oddly, I don't think I've seen too many radios. I've seen lots of radios with dual rectifiers, but with dual 6X5s, that's kind of strange. Now those rectifier tubes have a bad reputation, and I'm sure there will be somebody out there who will argue with me, but I believe that reputation is deserved. I personally have fired up 2 radios with 6X5s in them that where the rectifier has failed. And I'll talk about more in another video what fails in those, but I have a small stash of the ruggedized military 6X5s, the WGTs, that I believe are much better rectifier tubes, and I sell them to customers if they want them. Now, if customers are certain they're going to be with their radio 100% of the time while they're playing it and so forth, well, that's their choice. I do install a fuse in every radio that I put together in the line, but not in any other location in the set. I will if they want me to, but so that 6X5 is kind of a mixed bag. It's a real neat idea to have a 6-volt rectifier tube so you can do away with a 5-volt winding. But they do have a bad reputation. At least the early ones do. The later ones apparently were improved and didn't have the problem. So I'll talk about more about that in another video because I've never seen that done. But anyway, this 11S 474, I'm going to fire it up now. Let me turn the television off because it is a source of noise for this. So let's do that. All right. This is the radio. This is the chassis. Now, as I mentioned, I have not hooked up the I-tube yet. There's the new wiring harness. I'll strap it all together once I've got everything in place and I have the lengths correct. You know, the tone control is connected. Of course, these wires were actually in good shape. These are cloth covered, which for 1940 is odd because I've seen a lot of 1940s where I have to replace all these wires. These wires are good. I like to leave them alone if I can. And of course the preset tuning, I still have to work on that assembly, so I just left that disconnected. No big deal. There are the twin 6X5s right here, and this also has twin 6V6 output. It's push-pull output, and there's the 6J5 inverter tube. I did run into, I thought I'd be done with this yesterday and ready to do this video yesterday. Oh, by the way, this is Sunday. I forget the date. I think it's October 16th. Anyway, it's Sunday at 12:50, just after, almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So there you go. This thing is. I was starting to say I had a bum 6J5 detector tube socket that I had replaced. Some bonehead had worked on this thing with the tubes in place. This is the only way I can figure that it happens because I've seen it before. And they must have worked on it with the tube in place, and some of the solder that holds the wire from the tube element in the pin had melted and gone down into the socket. And I know that's true because when I looked at the tube that fit into that socket, that solder was gone. And there's coarse solder down in the socket. Now, when I worked on the radio then, that solder heated up and flowed into maybe a place where it blocked me from putting the tube in. And so I had real problems. I had to, after I finished the darn chassis, I had to take that socket out, disconnect everything, take that socket out, prepare a good socket for it. I had a real good ZENITH socket, even a 6J5 socket that was marked 6J5. So perfectly correct for this radio, and I had to install that. Now, I still have some other work to do. As you can see, there's the crumbling wire disease, what I call it, that so many late 30s and early 40s radios had. You see that on the grid lead from that IF transformer. And there are a few other wires like that, but really this one has mostly cloth wires, and which is really nice. There are a few, and they have mostly to do with the IFs. So and I'm going to rework the lead harness for the wave magnet. So the wave magnet wires are fine. I'll clean them up. The wires are fine, but you can see they're a mess where they go into the socket, and I'm sorry, into the plug. And the plug itself, somebody has grabbed a pair of pliers and squeezed one of the pins and squeezed it out of shape, so it's hard to get in there. I'm not going to force it, and I will clean it up, and it'll go in and out easily when I'm done. But for the time being, I just want to test this thing out and make sure it's going to work okay. There's your typical wave magnet. Earlier ones were in a cardboard box. For some reason, Zenith went to this weird. I've seen this a lot. At first time I ever saw it, I thought it was someone's oddball replacement. But Zenith started using these cloth covers around the outside perimeter of the wave magnet. Don't know why they did that. I like the box, but you know, actually they both work fine. And so this thing is complete and in good shape. I'll clean it up. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And then the speaker has a tear in it, so I've got the volume turned down. I began the repair on the speaker. I've done the first half of it just to kind of draw it together. And then I'm gonna dampen the paper that I used on the back side to draw it together. And then once I've done that, I'll do the same with the top section, but I have to be real slow about it because I don't want to distort the cone. Otherwise, this is an absolutely beautiful speaker. And I have already hooked this speaker up to another radio. I know it's fine. Everything works fine. The coil's checked out okay, so I just need to make that repair. It's not a big deal. I'll get that done probably today. And this has the television and phono switch. And Zenith like to use those oddball connectors. And there's really nothing that's sized like it. A lot of times I'll put something, if somebody wants an input there and I can manage it inside the circuit, I'll put like a 3.5 millimeter input, auxiliary jack somewhere on the radio and utilize that function. That's up to the owner. It's something I can sometimes do, sometimes not. It just depends on the radio. I suspect with this radio it'll work out fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn on the Variac. Now, my Variac makes some pretty strange audible noise, and there's a little bit of RF noise that it will introduce into the radio. I've got to fix it. I suspect that in the transformer part of my whole box here, in the actual Variac, that the contact wiper is real dirty because there's a one point where it introduces more noise, and it just so happens to be that point is where I usually wind up being. So I've got my isolation transformer and my current line monitor, just an old vintage current line monitor, no big deal. So let's go ahead and crank up some current here, or some voltage. Oops, it would help if I actually look at voltage. I'm not used to looking at it through the camera. So I always go up in stages. I start about 60 just to kind of get the tubes warming up. And also I like to do that when I have brand new electrolytics in there, of course. If they've been sitting on the shelf for more than 10 minutes, it doesn't hurt to form them a bit by increasing the voltage slowly. So I only do that for a couple minutes just to make sure it's going to be okay. Then I'll go ahead and step her up to 90. I usually start to see some conduction right around 90 or so. And you'll see the current meter will start to move as the rectifier tubes begin to conduct and produce high voltage. So there we go. There it goes. Okay, now every time I raise input line voltage, I'm going to increase the current to the radio. Aha! Starting to hear some noise coming from the speaker. I hear static. That's a really good sign. Let's move her on up to about 100 volts. That should be plenty to do what I need to do. I'm hearing nice, loud, static, robust sound. And, of course, I have dial lights. Alright, let's do a little bit of... I'll just tune it manually.
That's Mitt Romney.
Hey, check that out.
That you find acceptable down the road. They would have done...
Steve talks to the vets about your pets.
Tell this minute for his...
Oh yeah, this radio is going to be just fine. I suspect I'm not going to have to do much for aligning, and I totally recapped this thing too, and most of the resistors. I mean, I'd say about 95% of the resistors I've replaced.
The assembling of ourselves together.
The bacteria and...
An experience like...
Okay, I want to be real careful because I don't want to stress that speaker with that tear. So I'm going to take it easy on that thing. And I'll drop the voltage down. You hear that noise as I'm turning it? That's that wiper making all sorts of noise. So I believe that this radio is going to work out just great. Again, this is a 1940 ZENITH 11S474 11 tube radio. Really nice. It was an expensive set, I'm sure. Not their top of the line, of course, but expensive. This was not a cheap radio that was a throwaway radio. That's why, by the way, a lot of these larger radios, these big console radios, there's so many of them that were preserved because they were an investment. I mean, people spend a lot of their dough buying one of these things, and they treated them well. And, you know, back when these things were around, you know, when something began to wear out or whatever, you didn't just throw it away, you got it fixed. And if you didn't have the means or the desire to fix it today, well, you put it away somewhere so you could fix it later. So these, that's how so many of these are preserved so nicely. Now, of course, this thing was pretty dusty and dirty, but all I really needed to do was take it apart, clean it, and lubricate, you know, and use some deoxit right here and all the electrical contact points. I took this tuning condenser off, and believe it or not, I clean it in this sprayer of my kitchen sink with a soft plastic brush and soap and water. And that gets 99% of all the grime off them, and the rest comes off with a little bit of lacquer thinner. And then I very carefully lube that ball bearing, and I put some deoxit in those contact sliders, and I lube that back bushing. And boy, these things, they work smooth as anything when you do that. They're just lovely. Of course, on a Zenith, you always wind up replacing those grommets, those isolating grommets. And there are 3 of them on this thing. These are a real nice radio to work on, really well made. The wiring looks like a rat's nest on them. That's, you know, some radios look a lot nicer. RCAs and GEs come to mind. They always look a lot more tidy than a Zenith. But doggone it, a Zenith is about the best receiver there was. And you saw, I did no alignment on this thing. All I did was recap it and replace just about every resistor and fired it up, and the darn thing just works fantastic. I'm sure the customer would be happy with it just the way it is. So I will go ahead and close out this video. Just wanted to give you a first look at the power up. Now I'm going to post this video right away, even though I haven't posted any other videos, and I'll kind of get this whole YouTube thing figured out, but I kind of like to keep the videos coming, otherwise people will forget I'm out here. So here you go. I hope you enjoyed this and look forward to some other videos on this radio. That's all for now.